And hello, I'm Joe Spina, and this is Frankly Speaking, where truth is our mission, reality our realm, set as we see it, and frankly as well. And the ever honorable Paul Crowley, my sidekick, co-host,
Hey, Joe.
mentor.
How you doing?
I'm well, and you? You're looking terrific at 173.
So what do you think, folks? He's wearing a brand new tie and a jacket.
Not brand new.
He's dying to get me to show up in jeans and a T-shirt someday. Maybe I will, just to throw him off a little bit.
It's not a bad idea. But, you know, we have a pretty decent show lined up for the folks today. Once again, we have to remind you we're going to go live, but because of some technical problems, it may be delayed later into September.
Right.
But
So
we will go live.
It's coming.
It's coming. Looking forward to that.
Once we know more clearly when, we'll get back to everybody, let everybody know.
So let me get to Frankly Joe, Paul.
Go ahead.
Folks, let's get that Frankly Joe up there. It's called Separation of News and Opinion. The left goes ape when a coach kneels with his players in prayer prior to the game. The left screams, oh, separation of church and state. When it comes to separation of news and opinion, well, that's another story. No screaming. So leave it to the editor-in-chief, Gerard Baker, of the Wall Street Journal, to speak out. Critical interpretation and selective criticism is not reporting, nor is serving up commentary dressed as news, cautions Baker. Furthermore, he argues, news outlets, print and otherwise, have completely abandoned objectivity. Facts have somehow become controversial. For example, the New York Times and the Washington Post front page lead reports often tout incriminating information only to bury the mitigating information deep within the article. Sounds familiar, huh? Well, if separation of church and state is sacrosanct for a vibrant and free society, so too then should separation of news and opinion.
Right. Hey, can I just, I'm going to use ambiguities about this. I don't want to put any names out there. But a few months back, the Trump administration was floating an idea about making cuts to the community development block grant money, right? Mm-hmm. And for anybody who benefits from the community development block grant money, that's a crisis, right? You go into crisis mode, we've got to fix this thing, we can't let it happen. So they figure out ways that they want to say that it's bad. And the way that they addressed it was by saying that part of the community development block grant money nationwide is used for Meals on Wheels. Now, GLIS is involved in Meals on Wheels, as you know. We provide meals, 1,100 a day. We go out all around the community.
Good thing, by the way, Paul.
Very good thing, right? Yeah. So a reporter for a Massachusetts newspaper, I'm not going to talk about who the reporter was or the newspaper, contacted us because they wanted to find out about this decision that Trump was making to essentially cut Meals on Wheels funding. That was the tenor of the conversation.
Okay.
So I took this call with the reporter and we spoke about it. And I proposed that this reporter go on shadow one of our Meals on Wheels vans, so they can kind of watch the whole thing and see what we're doing. And I talked about how it's not just about the meal, it's also about the interaction with an individual on a daily basis for a lot of these folks. So the reporter was asking me some very important questions about, the impact of the CDBG cuts, right? Now, GLIS spends about $2 million+ on our nutrition program. It's not just Meals on Wheels, it's across the board. And the impact of if we were to lose the funding for from the Community Development Block Grant, it would have been $24,000 or 1% of our budget, 1%. And that didn't mean that people were going to go without meals. It meant that we were going to have to, maybe delay buying a new vehicle, or tighten up a policy here or a rule there, or get some people to do joint responsibilities. We were going to be able to manage it. It was going to be the administrative end of it was all going to change. So nobody was going to be adversely impacted. So I'm telling this reporter this reporter calls me back at a later date. No, she was going to call me back at a later date, and I didn't hear from her for a couple of days. So I reached out to her. And she said, well, I talked to my editor, and
Yeah.
they decided that this wasn't a story worth pursuing.
Why?
The reason they didn't want to pursue the story was because it wasn't going to be negative towards Donald Trump. Can you believe it? So here was a big, so the world was on edge because they were going to cut the community development block grant. They discovered that the biggest component of that was the Meals on Wheels, which was a very small component. And when they couldn't use that to jettison the idea, they walked away from it entirely and pretended it didn't even exist. And that's what your whole story is about.
Precisely. What she was doing is she had a preconceived notion. Rather than reporting, she wanted to editorialize. Is that
Right.
rather than reporting what? And by the way, would you explain to these folks that because that word "cut" is banded around, and it isn't a cut. It's jargon.
Well,
it's instead of receiving a projected increase, it'll be lesser of an increase, and they defined it as a cut.
That is true in normal budgetary process, but because this is a block grant, it is a fixed number, and it either stays the same, it gets cut, or it gets increased annually. And what they were talking about doing was cutting it. And by the way, in the 8 years that Barack Obama was the president, it was cut probably 4 or 5 times.
So this wasn't anything new.
Right. It was only new because they could use it to crucify Trump.
And you said it was 1 cent on the dollar, 1 penny on the dollar.
How it was going to impact my agency.
All right, for $24,000 out of a $2 million expenditure.
Yeah.
That's nickels and I mean that's
Right. Yeah. But it, it just gets. It just really does help explain the narrative that is used around trying to, to use information to either make somebody look good or make somebody look bad. In this case, it was to make Trump look bad.
That's what Baker was complaining about, the editor of the Wall Street Journal.
Right.
He was saying, hey, report the news and leave the editorial to the editorial page. Right. Don't allow your feelings to find their way into the story. Yeah, and that's what's happened.
And more important than that is, as individuals, and we talk about a free society and the importance of democracy and all that kind of stuff, how free and how important is democracy when all of our means of understanding what's going on at the local level, the state level, and the federal level is subject to the whims of the individuals writing it, and they're not reporting accurately so that we can form our own conclusions. That's very
propaganda, Paul.
That's a very serious problem.
Of course it is.
Yep.
And that was well chronicled. The Nostradamuses of modern times, and Huxley and Orwell and Ayn Rand, who predicted that this was going to happen.
Right.
Because if you want to have, look, folks, separation of fact, news, and opinion is as significant as separation of church and state, if not more so. As a matter of fact, the Constitution does not have separation of church and state within its bounds. It says you can't establish a religion, you can't have a state religion. But it doesn't really talk about separation of church and state. That evolved.
Right. That was kind of a talking point at one point.
Sure.
What it was, more than anything.
Hey, I want to get to this, frankly, Paul, because you have some really fascinating stuff yourself to get to. And, and folks, you're going to get some really good information in the next few minutes.
Okay, so before I do that, maybe you can put that, frankly, Paul, up on the board, but I want to say that this is in response to an editorial in the item from August 20th called Defining Progress for Lynn. It's a story about the ongoing debate between capitalists and bringing investment dollars into a city and the left, like groups like Neighbor to Neighbor who they're trying to define progress, Paul. Who describe their group as organizing to put people in the planet before profit. So, there's clearly a different perspective on this thing. But anyway, so if you read that editorial, you gain a better sense. So here's my comments on that. Frankly, Paul, the very nature of progress is change. A lot of people, institutions, and especially bureaucrats are not fond of change. In fact, they resist it with all their might. Advocates such as Neighbor to Neighbor resist for the sake of resisting. They exist to resist. Their mantra is putting people and planet before profits. Translated, that means no to capitalism and resistance to progress. Interesting that in the name of progress, they resist progress.
Of course,
right?
Yeah.
So it is that the item in an editorial defining progress for Lynn, fashions a false dichotomy between developers and neighbor to neighbor. Each views progress from polar opposite perspectives. The item argues that the perception that neighbor to neighbor's true agenda is masked a feigned love for Lynn must be overcome. So too, the notion that developers are profiteers merely paying lip service to improving Lynn. According to the item, only when people of opposing viewpoints can sit down and forge their differences into consensus do good things happen. The item could start by taking its own advice. So anyway, one of the things I'd like to point out there is that, this notion that, if you're a capitalist, you don't care about people, and if you're, these neighbor-to-neighbor groups, you don't care about, all you care about is the people, and everything else has to go. There is a balance between the two. What I always refer to, and I do this in work every single day, is this notion that every individual in society has a social compact. Mm-hmm. They make a compact with the society, which is governed by local, state, and federal level, and it basically, that the social compact is you have a responsibility to do right by yourself and take care of yourself as well as you can, and to the extent that you can't, the state, local, and federal governments are there, along with a lot of other groups like churches and so forth, to create a safety net to protect you. So that's what I call the compact. You can't just say, I want the state to do everything for me. You can rely on the state to do everything, to do things for you when you need it, but you should also be trying to do for yourself as much as possible.
Tell me about equivalencies, Paul. Is it equivalent? The item creates an equivalency. It says that these folks that are going to go out there and create wealth, which benefits everybody in the city, and without chickens laying eggs, none of us get to have breakfast. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
And these other folks who are contributing nothing, who are the ones who are eating the eggs, right? Why would there be an equivalency? I don't see that. In other words, you don't need to have these polar opposites at a table because they're not co-equal.
Right. Well, and just to take that one step further, just think about the purpose of a corporation or a business. By the way, Walmart and GE and Bank of America are all big corporate structures, right? Let's put them aside just for a moment. But basically, business is usually smaller businesses, mom and pop operations. They go into business to generate income to support their families, right? They do this type of thing, right? It happens all the time.
Right.
The reason that somebody goes into business is not specifically to help somebody else. It's for themselves. They want to be able to develop a way of generating income for themselves and a legacy for their family and so forth. They do all these things all the time, but that's the primary reason.
But what's the spin-off effect of that?
The spin-off effect is if they succeed and their business grows, they'll hire more people and all that kind of stuff.
So they stimulate and create wealth.
The important thing is it's a spin-off. What you will get from the progressive left is that because you're doing it for your own selfish reasons, that it's bad. But
Paul, why do people go to college? Why do they get educated? Isn't that selfish reasons to better themselves?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's such a silly argument.
You're right. It absolutely is.
The point of the matter is simply this. You need to create wealth. The mom and pop store creates wealth. It takes a risk, Paul.
Absolutely.
If it doesn't succeed, it loses everything. It takes a risk. It doesn't feel entitled.
Right.
Entitlements say, I want an iPhone because I breathe.
Right. Well, we have a kind of a credo that we stick to at GLIS and other human service type of organizations, and it is that we want to help people who need help, but they have a right to fail. An individual has a right to fail.
You can't succeed unless you have.
But it's in the context of somebody who isn't, taking all their life savings and buying a business. It's people who are down and out on their own and so forth. So my feeling is that if the progressive left can be supportive of that kind of right to fail, then they should be supportive of another right to fail, where if they have a right to fail, but also have an opportunity to succeed. That opportunity to succeed can do more than just help the individual's success. It can prevent them from becoming wards of the state, and it can prevent others from being stuck in the same malaise.
Are you entitled to the rewards of your work, of your drive? Are you entitled to that?
Most of it. I have to give some of it to the
Let's
government.
talk about what's happening, the tragedies happening in Texas as we speak now.
Right.
If you do not create wealth, can those folks down there who have lost everything, can they ever recover again? That's only, you know, FEMA is going to come up with a barrel of money to try to take care of those folks that, through no fault of their own, got devastated.
Right.
That's the purpose of government. That's compassionate, and that's the way it should be.
But that's not the primary solution.
but it's there to
there's insurance that will cover most of everything.
Some of it.
And there will be people that were
But that's going to drive up rates.
But there will be people that were either underinsured or uninsured who will need help from
People completely wiped out, Paul.
I get it.
Utterly and
Right,
totally wiped
right.
out. And what I'm saying to
But
you
the
is,
government comes in at the end to fill the breach. If only 80 or 90% of the impact is covered financially through insurance, the other 5, 10, or 15% needs to be brought in. That's where we as society should be
but if it wasn't for
contributing.
the insurance companies, which is a private enterprise that makes profit, you wouldn't have the offset.
Right.
You know, so my point being is that the federal government does not produce money. It
No.
does not produce or create wealth.
It burns it.
It extracts it.
Right.
It takes it out of the system and redistributes it. Now, there are just ways of redistributing it.
And you have to do it in part.
Right.
But it needs to be the supplement. It shouldn't be the primary, is the way I've always
It's
said.
there for emergencies, Paul,
right.
as what happens down there. Do you begrudge your tax dollars being spent to help out the people down in Texas?
I don't, but I will put a qualifier on that.
Yeah.
I begrudge the fact that there'll be an administrative waste of dollars. in
Which
the whole
happened to
process.
Katrina, went down a rat hole.
Right.
So you'd have to have accountability along with it, responsibility.
I would much rather the government say, you know, Paul, we're going to have to charge an assessment to you of $1,000 to everybody who's gainfully employed, so that we can, you know, raise the
Offset,
money.
yeah.
I would much rather say, if you don't mind, I'm going to send $1,000 to I'm going to find a family. I'm going to send $1,000 to them so that they can.
Well, let me tell you what
spend
corporate
themselves.
America did. Budweiser stopped brewing, took its water, bottled it, and shipped it all down there. Tens of thousands of gallons of water down there as necessary, immediately.
Right.
That was corporate America. They can do that, Paul. You know why? Because they make profits.
Right.
If they didn't make profits, didn't have wealth,
Right.
they could not do that. So this is what I'm talking about. You know, I'm not a fan of monopoly. I'm not a fan of big business because
neither am I.
it can be very dangerous.
Right.
But you cannot possibly take care and have entitlement programs and have a commonwealth. We're a commonwealth, Massachusetts, right? You can't have that without a revenue producer. You need a reservoir that can be replenished.
Right.
And they can only be replenished by wealth.
Right.
The problem in the city of Lynn is that the wealth has been drained out of it, and there's not too much coming back in. Do you know that Lynn only grew at 0.04%? It has hardly grown at all, population-wise, right? But yet we've had this massive influx
Of
of
students.
students, which has completely crippled the budget, which is, we're going to get to the Hungry Beast. You know what the Hungry Beast is, Paul?
It's government.
The Hungry Beast
The
is the
Leviathan.
cost of education in the city of Lynn, and it had nothing to do, see, people don't realize, Mayor Kennedy's term of office was concurrent with the Obama administration, concurrent with him. When did our problems take place in Lynn? Open borders, sanctuary cities, that, and we became the recipients
magnet,
of the tsunami, is that what we call it? You know,
Tsunami.
the tsunami. Very good, Paul. You know, the influx. You take a look at the surrounding communities. Did Swampscott get any?
No.
Did Beverly get any?
They may have, I don't know.
But they didn't. It all came to Lynn for whatever reason. And she screamed and yelled about this. She sought help from the state and federal agencies and representatives who all of a sudden were deaf to it.
Right.
And now they want to turn around and try to say that she is...
It's the reason for a deficit problem. Right?
Yeah, well, it has nothing to do with her. She did it. Her and Kathy Latham have done a marvelous job of keeping the per pupil cost down.
Right.
Because it's 13.6 roughly per thousand, which Swampscott is 15, folks. Salem is 17. per 1,000, okay? So you can look around.
We're saying it's 17,000 per student.
Per student.
Right.
We're at 13,600.
Right.
Swampscott's at 15. Okay, so Lynn has actually done a fairly decent job, given that most of our students come from disadvantaged backgrounds with problems that are
In addition to
over and above
English language issues and so
sure.
forth.
And by the way, Paul, and this is why I applaud the city of Lynn, because when I go to check your favorite school, your alma mater,
Yep.
and I'm down there and I see what they do to kids that have health problems and disabilities from birth.
They do 4 kids, you mean, not 2.
4 kids.
Yeah.
Very good,
Okay,
Paul. That's a great point. Other communities don't do that. As a matter of fact, they send their kids to Lynn. Of course, the money follows. I'm not going to say that they don't. But they do such a great job.
Yeah.
And we do it consistently. So on the Beast, the Lynn school population, Paul, typically of a typical Massachusetts community, on average is about 10% of the total population community. We've talked about this over and over and over again.
So let me just to reiterate. So with the exception of Lynn, on average, Massachusetts, cities and towns, 10% of their population are students.
Roughly.
Roughly, right.
Like Salem has 41,000, they have 3,700 students. That's under 10%. Right.
So, but not in Lynn, is what
No, we're approaching 20%.
Okay.
Okay? That's the problem. Now, you pointed this out to me, Paul, and why don't you talk about this part? How many newcomers have we had since 2010?
2,600 newcomers into the school system
Which
since 2010.
translates to, you're the accountant.
Well, you did the math for me, so I'm going to
that's
cheat.
okay.
370 per year.
All right. So if you do the math on that, Paul, that's roughly $5 million a year. Or over the course of the last 7 years, that's $35 million added, slapped onto our budget. And our budget has been straining for other reasons, correct?
In addition to that, you have the formula that calculates net school spending was done incorrectly over the years, so we were coming up short there. So to fix a technical error, not a
Yes, that's right.
By the way, I would argue that if for example you weren't meeting the quote net school spending number in particular years, but you had a certain level of success in spite of that, isn't that really the goal of the net school spending, is to keep success rates up?
Sure.
So why wouldn't, when they look back 20 years and said, oh, we've been doing it wrong all along, so you guys didn't pay us enough money, why wouldn't they look and say, well, let's look at the success rate and see if let's see if the kids got screwed or not. If the kids didn't get screwed, there shouldn't be any penalty on the city, right?
Well, let me ask you this then, Paul. If you recognize that fact, should not state representatives that represent the city of Lynn recognize that fact, and shouldn't they bring that case to the state?
Yeah, I was very surprised that we didn't get any kind of relief at all on that.
Yeah,
I mean, well, maybe we did in some
our
form
reps
or
should be
another.
screaming and yelling over that, shouldn't they?
Right, they should at least ask the question. I would want the state education department to explain to me how they look at the situation that unfolded and did in fact, as a result of the underspending of net school spending, did our students suffer? And if you can't say that they did suffer, I would say then it was money not well spent. I mean, it was not spent, and that was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the whole point of the matter is this. The mayor must account for an additional $5 million in revenue, folks, each year to balance the books. An additional $5 million per year at that rate. That's not an easy task, particularly when you get little help from state and federal agencies to offset flow of immigration children into the Lynn school system, a phenomenon created by the federal and state fiat with little, if any, concern for the unintended consequences of their policies, Paul.
You're being awfully generous by saying little, if any. I would say there was none. They had no concern for the unintended consequences. In fact, they probably didn't even, they weren't unintended. I would argue that at least some of the bureaucrats were looking forward to seeing a collapse the system.
Perhaps. You know, a good friend of mine who is now in Florida, a confirmed, left-winger, great guy. In fact, we're going to do his witticisms. I think he stole them from us. Billy Demento. I was going to have him on, but he's in Florida. So we communicate by Facebook from Florida. And we go back and forth with each other. And he said, oh, no, Lynn only spends $3,000 per student.
Where did you get that?
Oh, because of state aid. You know, he says, we only spend like 50 million as opposed to 220. I said, no matter how you cut the ice, we spend $220 million on education in the city by all sources, right? No matter how you look at it.
So is he arguing that because we get so much money from the state, we should be glad?
He's saying that that Lynn only per pupil cost is only $3,000, because he wants to, and he's trying to say this that Swampscott's per pupil cost is $12,000. He's doing fuzzy math.
What he's doing, just the Swampscott portion.
Yes, they pay 12 and they pay 15. They get 3 from the state, but that's all fact. Don't forget, the city of Lynn contributes a whole bunch more money to the state coffers than Swampscott does.
Right.
All right? So we're just getting a return on our investment. You could argue that way, couldn't you?
Sure. Yep.
You know how many people do scratch tickets in Swampscott? Little or none.
Right.
So that takes care. And why I bring this up, this was Hungry Beast was a news report in the item, but it was really an editorial, wasn't it?
Yes.
You
Sure,
know
sounds like it was.
Yeah, they were trying to, in effect, they were trying to say, Judy Kennedy, you know, what did you do about this? What did she do about it, Paul? She went national. That's what she did about it.
Right. And the state delegation of which, you know, we can talk about who those state delegation people are, as well as the former congressman, were all asked to help out, and they all basically whiffed.
Yeah.
They either said they would do something and did nothing, or they stalled and ultimately did nothing.
My point is that the article is consistent with what I said in the beginning. It's news masked, or opinion masked as news.
Right.
And with a purpose. There's a purpose to this, Paul. And I think I can be upfront with this. Listen, make no bones about it, folks. We all have preferences. I do, you do.
Yeah.
But you don't put your thumb on the scale.
Right.
And that's not reporting. And it seems to me that the paper of record in this city has put its thumb full and foot on the scale.
Right, and it's all designed.
And it's obvious.
It's all designed to get rid of the incumbent mayor if possible.
Step 1, Paul Crowley, folks, can talk about this subject for the next year. Seawalls protect shorelines from erosion. They also prevent coastal flooding. Some seawalls do more, as is the case with the construction of the Lynn Harbor seawall. Simultaneously, a public walkway extending from Heritage State Park by a proposed 348 apartment North Harbor project to the ferry landing will be built. All paid for by EDIC securing a $1 million Seaport Economic Council grant. Kudos should go to Governor Baker,
Lieutenant Governor Polito, she chairs the commission.
My co-host, Paul Crowley, and I will explain how, and Jim Cudell for making it happen.
Not to mention the mayor for supporting it right from the very beginning.
That's why you're here, because you know all about it. Now the next step. Paul, please, because you are specifically on that board.
I'm on the Seaport Economic Council, correct.
You were put on that council by Karen Polito. Explain that to the folks, what it's all about, and how the actions of the lieutenant governor, through the lieutenant governor, in conjunction with the mayor, Jim Cudell, and you made this thing happen.
Right. So basically, this all started when the ferry was going to be shut
Disbanded.
down. Yeah, remember, it was last summer. There was no money and so forth. So I started saying, what we need to do is go to the Seaport Economic Council, which is a council that I'm on. It's chaired by Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito.
She put you on. She did.
Well, the governor did.
Yeah, go ahead.
And what they do is they provide funding for economic development along seaports, the coastal region.
Right.
There's 77 coastal communities in Massachusetts. So Lynn is one of them, obviously. So I said, geez, we got this council, we need to pursue it, we need to push it hard and try to figure out a way to leverage the resources of this council with our needs at the ferry. So I talked to the mayor about it, and she thought it was a great idea that we should pursue it. And I told her that I was going to talk with the developers at the North Bay site because they were getting ready to, come to terms with this 348 unit development.
Right.
One thing led to another. I found out how we needed to do it, and it needed to involve the EDIC. So Jim Cowdell got involved, and his group put together the grant proposal. They had to do a work, and it was kind of like it's like a public-private relationship because the private had to give an easement and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, so there was a lot of going back and forth. As it was proceeding along, with the support of the governor and with the support of Jim Cowdell and with the support of the developers.
And mayor, and the mayor.
And the mayor. I went to the lieutenant governor and said, I wanted to talk to you about this. And she said, if it's for Lynn, I want to know what it's all about. So she was very anxious to see what she could be doing to help Lynn. So we laid it all out for her, and she made sure that we got a full voice on this whole thing. It was, it was flushed out. The people at the bureaucracy, the economic development, were asking for all the right information. They wanted to see it happen, and it ended up happening. At the end of the day, we got the $1 million. The headline in the item reads that Lynn wins lottery or something like that.
But the item never mentioned Lieutenant Governor Polito, never mentioned...
No, that's not true.
They did mention her?
They did, yeah, way down in the story.
Did they mention you?
No.
And you're on the board. And you were instrumental.
No, they were busy mentioning me for, because of my connections to the marijuana dispensary.
Did they mention the mayor?
They didn't.
Did they give kudos to Governor Baker? They were quick to criticize him on the ferry.
No, they didn't give him any kudos at all.
So, when all is said and done, they gave credit to Jim Cowdell, which they should have. He was part and parcel. No
right.
question about it.
And then they got quotes from all of the state reps and the senator in the area.
Who did absolutely nothing.
Who only knew about it because it was a done deal.
All right. So that they could take a bow.
Yep. By the way, that was because the lieutenant governor's office insisted that all the state reps and the senator be
So
quoted.
she shared the wealth.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I have a paper of record that takes shots at Baker. Happens to be a Republican.
Shots at Kennedy.
Shots at Judy Kennedy.
Shots at Paul Crowley.
Who happens to be an independent.
Yeah.
And most people think you're a Republican, but you're actually an independent.
Yep.
All right. And gives the Democrats credit for that which they had nothing to do with.
That sums it all up.
Did you get that, folks?
So you folks were asking about stuff about Lynn, so I'm sorry to say this is a very big part of Lynn.
So this walkway, and I was really impressed by it. The seawall.
By the way, can I tell you, now that we get the politics of it out of the way,
you're the master of
now that
this.
we get the politics out of the way, let's talk about what it's going to mean. So this seawall is going to allow for the creation of a boardwalk that's going to connect Seaport Landing.
Which is by that condos where the marina is.
Yeah, the ones that were built back in the 80s or whatever. It's going to connect that to the ferry. So you're going to have all the people who live in Seaport Landing, plus the 348-unit development that's on the other side of Heritage State Park, plus people that go to Heritage State Park, plus there's the crossover. What do they call it? It goes up and over the highway and it comes down on the other side where North Shore Community College is. So all the kids from the college can take the ferry. The people who live in Seaport Landing can take the ferry. The people who live in the 348-unit apartment building can take the ferry. So all of a sudden, we've created essentially a flow of potential business for the ferry people.
I want the hot dog stand along the way.
So and let me the hot dogs. So but let's think about it. So there's going to be a walkway. People are going to be able to walk from the ferry all the way to Seaport Landing.
But isn't it a good thing? Even if they don't go on the ferry, if they just summer stroll.
Right. And let me just say that this is why I get so upset with the stuff that I read in the newspaper, and that is because they were so quick to blame the governor for cutting the funding. Yet he and Lieutenant Governor Polito looked at funding to build some capital infrastructure that is good for the economy down there and potentially could solve the ferry issue at the same time. And that is an extraordinary,
of course,
instead of just throwing money at problems and all that.
Well, as it stands now, the ferry was a big loss leader, Paul. I hate to tell you.
I agree.
They only got about $7 for something that cost $30 to accomplish. So it was minus 25 every time they went back and forth per person.
Right.
All right. That's voodoo economics.
You got to figure out a better way than that. I mean, you can subsidize it a little bit, but not that much.
No, it was ridiculous.
Especially when you realize that, and this is something that I wasn't aware of, but the city tried to get some grant money to support the funding of the ferry, and they did not get the grant money. And you know why? Because the amount of carbon footprint that they were saving by people not driving to Boston was more than 3 times as much for the carbon footprint of the ferry itself. How's that?
Good point. Paul, we could do this quickly before we move on. Market Basket opens this weekend, huh? That's you love that cul-de-sac there.
It was last Saturday.
That was their opening?
Yeah. And
I heard the place was packed.
It absolutely was, and I didn't go anywhere near it. I mean,
really?
As somebody who would like to be reporting on it, I should have been there, but I was just I just figured the traffic was going to be a nightmare, and there were going to be all kinds of giveaways and all, lots of pomp and circumstance. So I just figured I would stay away.
So that is probably one of the great projects that's taken place in recent times in the city of Lynn, correct?
Right, and they're already starting to work on the other side of the street too, which is
really. Did that happen on Mayor Judy's watch?
It did. I would say.
Does she get any credit for it?
I think she's in line to get some credit for it. Sure.
Does that offset the fact that this?
By the way, I would say that there's a lot of credit to go around there. Certainly, the mayor managed to bring the developer Patsios and the folks from Demoulas and GE together to come up with the deal. But that doesn't happen if we don't open North Federal Street up, or Federal Street up.
And how did that happen?
That happened under the Clancy administration.
The what?
Under the Clancy administration.
Okay. The
I
city
was on the council.
What, they opened it up? All right. So everything is interrelated.
Yep.
Okay. But the point of the matter is this. We're trying to create wealth in the city by development.
Yep.
Right?
Right.
This is one leg of it.
Right.
You're talking about 348 units apartment where the old Chevrolet site is, right? That adds, that's $80 million, Paul, am I right?
Yep.
That adds wealth to the city, does it not?
Yep.
Now,
and it brings, because it's market rate, it brings people with disposable income.
that spend and lend, and it's recycles, the spin-off.
Right.
We called it, or I titled it, Step One, because it's only Step One
Right.
on the seaport development, right? You're planning, or the city's planning to go from there, from Heritage Park, to General Evans Bridge.
Right. So let me just point out that, and I know, and I talked to a lot of folks about this over the years that I see, and they all express a similar sense of frustration with, hearing for years that there's going to be development on the Lynnway, and it never has, and never has, and never has. But I'll tell you, the last cycle when they moved the power lines, while the market was, doing pretty well, and then that was like an 07, 08 type of time frame, and then the market collapsed, right? So there was really no chance that was going to develop in that, during that cycle. So it needed to wait for a new cycle to emerge, and that's the cycle that's emerging now, right? So you've got a perennial superstar when it comes to real estate development in the city of Lynn, in partnership with an outside developer to do the 348 unit site at the Beacon site. I would bet dollars to donuts that as soon as that shovel goes in the ground and it starts to come up and people start to see it taking shape, that there will be a deal on the South Harbor side.
Of course.
And
Because they'll just wait.
Now, certainly the city and EDIC will be very much involved in it, but it's not going to be the city and EDIC that are going to make it happen. It's going to be private developers that are going to see an opportunity, and they're going to seize on it, and they're going to make it happen. Because
and the item wants them to sit down with neighbor to neighbor, which would be an obstacle and a roadblock.
And the taxes that this would create to the city, as well as the jobs, neighbor to neighbor should be, bowing in the streets for this.
Of course they should, but they won't be. They'll be resisting.
Right.
Paul, Have you ever noticed lawn signs and bumper stickers always say, vote for me, but never tell you why you should? Have you ever noticed that? Now, there's an exception, because
My sign didn't say why you should vote for me, although I did have a motto.
What was yours?
Always working hard for Lynn.
Motto's good. I noticed that there were two of the candidates running who had something to say over and above, "Hi, it's me, vote for me." Brian LaPierre on his sign said, "Getting the job done for everyone." Has a little poetry in there.
I never saw that one.
Yeah, getting the sign.
That's on one of his signs?
The big long,
I didn't see that. I missed it.
unique, the new rectangular one,
Yeah.
which I kind of like, to be honest with you.
It's like a
nicely designed.
1x8 or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't, you know, by the way, signs were getting bigger and bigger to the point that it's getting ridiculous. And the new kid up in Ward 2 that I can't go anywhere without seeing, I'm at nighttime, I'm getting nightmares of green and white signs saying McGrain all over the place. And his says, "Time to do better." So those are the two. Now, there may be others.
Rick Ford says, citywide city pride.
I didn't see that on his. Does it say that?
Yeah.
Maybe that was when he ran for council at large.
Well, that's what he is running for, council at large, because he used to be a ward council. So that's how he's explaining his switch from Ward 7 to at large. He's basically saying he's going citywide because of his...
Rick Ford?
Yeah, citywide,
Really?
city pride.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yep.
Now, he's formidable. Folks,
Yep.
let's go down the list quickly and next week, right after Labor Day, when the official season starts, we'll really get into all the candidates.
Actually, by the way, just for everybody at home, on Tuesday, September 12th, I think, which is really, it's like 2 weeks from now, is primary day.
Primary day.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll be covering that. I don't know. We'll find out.
Yeah.
We'd like to,
Yeah.
because you're knowledgeable.
Well, I'll say about that.
But once they filter themselves out, it'll be a little easy
Right.
test. But there are, up in Ward, where I come from, Ward 2, there's four folks running. There's,
Right, so only 2 will get to advance, right? The
how
two-
many are running up? Well, mine is Starbard, McGrain, O'Toole, and Grocke.
Yep.
Those 4. 2 new faces. McGrain's been around. He ran for ward councilor, I think, in 5 or 6 a few years back.
Oh, he did?
Yeah. Not too successfully, by the way. Wayne Losey, he got himself a
Yeah,
candidate.
Billy
right?
O'Shea. Yep.
So you get Billy O'Shea and Losey in 1. And Ward 3 is starting to shape up as a little contest.
So that's Darren Sear and
You pronounce it.
George Mimateus.
Very good. That's because you're part Greek. So those 2.
He ran for at-large a couple
Ward
years
4
ago.
got thrown out. Bobby Tucker effectively protected his friend, Bobby Colucci, right?
Richie Colucci. Rich.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
He has a twin brother,
Yeah, Bobby. Yeah.
Bobby.
Robert and Richard, yeah.
I can't tell the difference between them.
Yeah. I
One's a
can.
ward council, though.
Yep.
Is 5 got a contest? No.
I think maybe there is.
There is?
Yeah.
Well, we'll find out, because I don't know.
It's not a substantial name, I don't think.
What about your friend, Mr. Capano? Is he being challenged?
I don't think so. And neither
And I
is-
think Walsh has got a freebie, right?
Yeah. 6 and 7 are off the hook.
At large, one is bye-bye,
There's 8 candidates.
and they
for-
are?
So you got the incumbents, which would be Buzzy Barton, Hong Nut, and Brian LaPierre.
Yeah.
And then we have the challengers, which would be Rick Ford, Tasso. I'm not going to bother with his last name. I can't do that. So Rick Ford, Tasso, Brian Field.
Yeah. John
Yeah.
Ladd.
John Ladd, and the other one.
Figueroa?
Figueroa, yeah. Jamie Figueroa. Nice kid.
So that's going to be an interesting race, because Ford's formidable.
Yep.
You can't say that Tasso wasn't formidable. What's fascinating about that race is the two folks, they're like Madonna or Oprah. They can do one name. It's, Buzzy and Tasso.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
That's recognizable that way. See, if you did Paul, they say, Paul who?
Right.
Right?
But everybody knows who Buzzy is, right? And everybody knows who Tasso is.
Yeah.
I've never met anybody that had a name, the same name as Tasso. Never.
Well, Buzzy.
Well, no, there was Buzzy Diamond. Remember Buzzy Diamond?
Very good.
He's gone now, but.
Do you know people, you're an accountant by profession or training? Is that
I have
accurate?
an accounting degree from Northeastern University, yes, Joe.
So you understand about being math challenged? Well, let's
I
get
don't
this.
consider myself math challenged, if that's what
Well,
you're saying.
I know you're not math challenged, but I'll tell you who are math challenged.
Okay.
Liberals
that's
are
where-
math
So that's
challenged.
where you're going with this, I get it.
Okay. So here's what we have. We have Billy Demento, arguing with me that 13,600 equals 3,000. In other words, 13,600 is what we pay per pupil cost. He says, no, it's only 3,000.
What he's saying is it costs, you're saying it costs $13,600 per student to educate the kids.
That's right.
He's saying the city of Lynn only pays $3,000 of that.
That's a liberal for you.
Right.
Okay. Now, we have the federal government. You think they know anything about math? They're 20 trillion in the dink. I mean, they know how to. And by the way, Paul, that happened in the latter part of my life.
Right.
That was George Bush the younger and Barack Obama. Those two folks were dastardly.
Three-quarters of it.
More than three-quarters.
It was like 4 or 5.
It was almost balanced when Clinton left office.
Right.
Under the contract with America.
Right.
All right?
It was like
so those two, in 8 years, they had a field day.
16 years, right. In 16 years, it went from
right. 16,
practically
8 and 8,
nothing
right.
to 20 trillion. And that doesn't even talk about the unfunded liabilities that exist.
I don't want to get into that,
Right.
which are hundreds of trillions.
So I got to tell you, when I was at Northeastern University, and this is over 30 years ago, I graduated.
You're dating yourself.
I graduated in 1987, and it was during the Ronald Reagan era. And one of my economics professors was I didn't have any political beliefs at that time. I was just trying to learn, but he was this guy that was outraged by the profligate spending of the Reagan administration, all right? Outraged by it. And he put, because the budget that was coming through, he said there was a $200 billion with a B dollar deficit. He was going to run a $200 billion deficit. Now, if we only were running $200 billion deficits today, it would be great, wouldn't it?
Sure.
But what he did was he tried to write $200 billion on the board.
Wow.
With big numbers.
And he
ran out of room.
Okay.
Because there's so many zeros in 200 billion, it's unfathomable.
That's billion. Now make a trillion and see what happens.
Right. So 1 trillion is 1,000 billion. Right?
Yeah.
So you have 20 trillion is 20,000 billion.
You're very good at math, Paul.
20,000 billion.
So, the net bottom line is that they have spent like drunken sailors, and my grandkids' future has been mortgaged. Right?
Right.
Okay. So much for Bush and so much for the Obama administration.
And by the way, everybody who was saying, oh, well, the only reason Obama had to do it was because of the craziness of Bush, and he was a conservative, so how can you even think like conservative? He was not a conservative. The fiscal policies of the Bush administration were not fiscally conservative in any way, shape, or form.
Plus, they had a Democratic Congress.
Well, yeah, I'll give you that.
Bush had a Democratic Congress. And
do you remember what happened in the second election? In 2004, everybody got a $400 rebate, a tax rebate. That was buying votes.
No.
Yeah, that's all.
Paul.
But they both do it. Is
what did we say last week? There wasn't a dime's worth of difference. That's what George Wallace said between Democrats and Republicans. It's truer today than it's ever been.
Right.
Take a look at the lineup. For example, Bernie Sanders. He wants to give free college education to everybody. That breaks the bank, Paul. You know what that adds up to? That's several trillion dollars. Is it possible to do?
Just think about this, right?
Yeah.
As part of one of the policies of the Barack Obama administration was he created a program where people who would, if they chose to go into public service and or nonprofit,
like AmeriCorps,
they could find a way towards getting their debt forgiven, for their college debt forgiven.
Oh, isn't that nice of them?
Right. Very expensive project.
Really?
And that's only for those who take advantage of it and in a kind of a sliding scale off and so forth. Making it free for everybody from this point forward is like that problem, which is bad, which is part of the reason why we have a $20 trillion debt, to a problem where our debt could go up $1 trillion a year. Because as soon as you say that education is now free, that doesn't mean that the educators are going to do it for free. That means that the government is going to pay for it. So that means
nothing for free, Paul.
So that means that the prices of education will go through the roof.
We're running out of time. We got 3 minutes here. We got to get this done. Democrats and rhinos, they don't know how to do math. They came up with this thing called Obamacare. How mathematically sound is that?
Not sound at all.
It's a disaster, right? You know what? Here's just a suggestion. And lastly, let me get to this because this is local and very important. Our pension funds. Now, Lynn's pension fund is about 40 to 50%, 45, 50% fully funded, and it's supposed to be totally funded in the out years, I think 34, right? However, the Massachusetts MBTA, and that's the board in which I think Tom McGee is the chairman of that board, isn't he?
No.
The joint board?
He is the co-chair of the Transportation Subcommittee of the legislature.
But they have jurisdiction over the MBTA?
Not over. I don't think they have jurisdiction over the board that controls the.
So they don't have oversight.
I mean, they can make noise, but I don't think they tell them how to
But
operate.
that thing's going to blow up. The fella who brought Madoff down said it was a Ponzi scheme. Says the exact same thing in the Massachusetts MBTA's pension fund.
Well, let me just tell you, there's a difference between a Ponzi scheme developed by Bernie Madoff and a Ponzi scheme developed by the state of Massachusetts. Let me just tell you there's a very big distinction.
Okay.
Bernie Madoff screwed a bunch of wealthy people.
Yeah.
The state legislature is screwing a bunch of middle-class people.
You know, we can't. That's a great point. We're not going to be able to get to Whitty,
Okay.
unfortunately. But there is. Are there any that I'd like to do real quickly? I guess not. We're not going to be able to get to Whitty. We got about a minute left. Paul, I must commend you. You're fairly modest, and he is, folks, because you were a driving force for something that was very good for the city of Lynn, and that's that wall. I mean, it's only $1 million. Not a heck of a lot of money, but what it does and the consequence of that and its potential, what it spins off, is critically important.
Right. But what was most important is that Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito are paying attention to the city of Lynn, and they want to do things to help the city of Lynn. And the only way the people of the city of Lynn will ever understand that that's in fact happening is if we tell it, because the politicians won't do it, and as you put out, the newspaper of record refuses to admit it.
Let me give you one other thing. This is an unintended consequence. Do you realize that the policies of Donald Trump are such, his enforcement of the border, wanting to build a wall, has really made a significant impact on the city of Lynn by cutting back on the flow of immigrant kids in the city. We're going to beneficiaries. Lynn's going to benefit from that policy. You know that?
Right, because the spigot is closed.
The spigot has been shut off. Yeah.
So what we need to do in a future show is to get the information about new enrollees in the let's call it the unaccompanied minor.
That would be an interesting.
I'd like to know what that is, and hopefully it is down, because we can't keep sustaining the growth.
No, that's the #1 issue, in my view, of this election season.
Right.
Across the board. What do we do about the influx? Because it goes beyond the schools, health, and a lot of other factors. That's about it, folks. So next week, same time, same station. Have a great week. This is right up your alley, Paul.